reporter for the previously, she's covered climate policy and the EPA for Bloomberg. Abby has written extensively on the critical minerals issue. And just as a fun fact, when she's not breaking news, she's apparently breaking a sweat teaching a cycling class in DC. Congressman Stauber is also joining us. He's the representative for Minnesota's 8th Congressional District, which is in the northeast part of the state. This is his second term. He's already making quite a difference, serving on the transportation and infrastructure, small business committees, and as the ranking member of the Natural Resources Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources. Earlier this year, he introduced the Accessing America's Critical Minerals Act of 2021, dealing with permitting reform. And while we're on the sports theme, Congressman Stauber also played for NCAA championship hockey team and was a professional hockey player. All right, moving along here, Rich Nolan, President and Chief Executive of the National Mining Association, which is the trade group for producers, processors, and here's organization including mining, forestry, paper, chemicals, and agriculture. John Cherry is also, which is a company that's been working to Minnesota. John's also an industry veteran, including 20 years with Rio Tinto, which is one of the world's largest mining companies. And lastly, joining us is Tristan Abbey, president of Comeris Analytics, a consulting firm. Before launching the firm last year, Tristan spent a decade in senior policy roles in the Senate and White House. He has 2 stints at the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and in between worked in the White House at the NSC and the NEC, also focusing on this issue. I was just told that I was breaking up a little bit, so apologize for that, but hopefully the rest of this will go well. And with that, I will turn it over to Abby.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the intros and thanks for having me. So Jeff started to set the stage a little bit, but before we hear from our panelists a little bit more and jump into the discussion, I'm gonna elaborate a little bit on what Jeff started to set the stage with, and so before we jump into this discussion. So lately in DC, especially among the energy community, we've started to hear more and more about critical minerals. Many lawmakers and experts that I've talked to say the coronavirus pandemic and the supply chain crunch on PPE and other medical equipment critical to protecting against COVID really served as a wake-up call. And the reality is, though, the United States has been losing ground for years, while other countries, especially China, have rapidly scaled up mining for lithium, cobalt, graphite, rare earth elements, and other critical minerals. The US was actually once home to the world's largest critical minerals mine. Now it is wholly reliant on foreign imports for 14 of the 35 minerals the Interior Department listed as critical during the Trump administration. So why does this matter in the energy context? These critical minerals are essential to the clean energy technologies that would power the economy in a zero carbon world, including solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries to store energy and power electric cars. For example, according to the International Energy Agency, a typical electric car requires 6 times as many minerals as a gas-powered car. Energy analysts project that if the world deploys the amount of clean energy it will need to reach net zero by 2050, a goal that President Joe Biden has also set domestically, demand for some of these critical minerals will skyrocket. The IEA report from May found the world's appetite for critical minerals for clean energy could expand by as much as 6 times by 2040 as governments strive to reach net zero by 2050. In an analysis last year, the World Bank estimated the world would need more than 3 billion tons of minerals and metals to deploy enough wind, solar, geothermal, and energy storage to meet the Paris Agreement. So in short, a lot of minerals are going to be needed in the future. And it's something the Biden administration is acknowledging too. Just a few weeks ago, the White House released a report examining vulnerabilities in key supply chains, among them critical minerals. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm has spoken frequently about the need to mine sustainably. Congress is acting too. House Republicans have been sounding the biggest alarm about this issue, pushing reforms to speed up permitting for critical minerals mines, as I'm sure Congressman Stauber will talk about. There have even been some bipartisan bills, such as initiatives passed in the 2020 year spending bill. But as many of our panelists are likely to touch on today, challenges remain for domestic mining, most acutely the time it takes to permit a mine and navigating environmental opposition. Some of the biggest questions in my mind are, does all of this action actually lead to more domestic mining in the US? Can President Biden smooth tensions that exist between industry and environmentalists and even among parts of his own administration? And can Congress find agreement to update some of the decades-old permitting and mining laws? Don't worry, I'm going to pose all of these questions and more to our panelists today, but first I'm going to open the floor to each of them for some brief opening remarks, starting with Congressman Stauber.
Well, thank you very much, Abby and Jeff. Appreciate being with you all today. I have to tell you that I'm really excited about our conversation today. You know, northeastern Minnesota, we've been mining for 135 years. We've done it well. We mine iron ore, which is made into taconite pellets, which is melted into steel, which is 85% of America's steel is mined from what we call the Iron Range. Now we're on the cusp of helping. We've talked about the critical minerals, and we're on the cusp of getting companies mining critical minerals in northeastern Minnesota in what we call the Duluth Complex, which is the biggest copper nickel find in North America. So we have the ability to help with the supply chain dependency. As you said earlier, 95% of our minerals are purchased from foreign nations. We can't do that anymore, especially with the pandemic. We've learned through the pandemic, Abby, that we can't do that. We can hold the dependency of this country in the palm of our own hands if we're just allowed to mine these minerals under the best labor standards and the best environmental standards. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. And as you said, the top Republican on energy and minerals resources, I'm shouting from the rooftops on our ability to remove our dependency on foreign nations, because we in Minnesota can help strategically this nation be dependent within ourselves and our own country. So.
Great. I'm looking forward to the discussion as well, Congressman. And Rich, I'll pass it over to you for some opening remarks.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Jeff, Abby, thanks so much for being here, Congressman. Great to see you again. Really appreciate the work that you and your team are doing on Capitol Hill right now, yesterday, all week, last week, the week before. It's relentless, and we really appreciate it. John, great to catch up with you. Look forward to hearing how things are going at PolyMet as well this morning. You know, there's been a tremendous amount of work in this space that we're all very excited about. You saw the report last week from the International Energy Agency, as well as the White House 100-day supply chain report. There's a lot in there for everyone. I guess we'll talk a little bit about how we smooth out some of the perhaps divergent recommendations from those reports and how we can all come together to really address what's holding up the growth in this country, whether it's modernizing the electric grid or addressing climate change, the future of transportation, and reshoring the industries of tomorrow. We're talking a lot today about supply chains and how we shore them up. Minerals is essential to just about everything. We firmly believe that as the administration talks about the Made in America agenda, that really should be mined in America as well. So this issue of, you know, foreign sourcing or whether we get it in the United States, I think we need all sources because the demand, as you see from the capital markets, is incredible. Whether it's lithium demand projected to grow 40-fold by 2040, or what we're seeing in graphite, cobalt, nickel, it's really off the charts. And I think it's a recommendation to policymakers. You know, the capital markets have spoken. How are the policymakers going to catch up with really the exploding demand in these materials? And we're here to help with that, and really excited to be here today. Thank you, Abby.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. And Tristan, I'll pass it to you now for some opening comments.
Thanks very much for having me on this panel. It's great to see everybody, even if we're still remote as the pandemic fades. I think minerals are a very fascinating issue for many people. It's been a decade that I've been working on the subject in some form or another, and it's been interesting to see its ups and downs in terms of how frequently it becomes a hot topic and then it fades away. Hopefully this time it does not fade away. I don't think our country can afford it to fade away again with no action taken. I have something of a cynical view on what's happening right now in the federal government, and I'm sure we will turn to the subject during the panel discussion. But just to set the scene for my own views are that nothing is actually happening, and that all this sort of running around in the administration, the 100-day study, the executive order on supply chains, we're seeing a lot of reports produced. We're seeing a lot of recommendations rehashed, pulled off the shelf, recycled, even though we're not really recycling minerals. We're seeing people mine their inboxes for old reports from think tanks and regurgitate those. We're seeing people welcome announcements, and we're seeing the administration talk a lot about minerals during its Senate confirmation hearings. But once they get confirmed, they go into the administration and they tweet about meatless meat and all sorts of other things that really shouldn't be the priority for the Department of Energy's Loan Program Office. So the administration.
I think we might have just lost Tristan. Well, I know he was making some really great points, and I loved all the critical minerals puns that he was throwing in there effortlessly too. We'll give him a minute to get back on, but John, while we wait for Tristan, let's turn to you for some. Oh, actually, he's back. So Tristan, we lost you in the middle of your comments. If you want to wrap up quickly.
Yes, sorry about that. I'll just say again, if anything actually is happening, prove me wrong. Thanks.
All right, fighting words there. I like it. So John, last but not least, we'll turn to you, John, for some opening comments, and then we'll jump into the discussion.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the invitation and seeing our friends there, especially Rich and Congressman Stauber. We spent some time with them. Great supporters of mining and our project. So, again, I'm the chairman, president, CEO of Polymet Mining. We are the first mine in the Duluth complex that Congressman Stauber mentioned. So it's the world's largest undeveloped copper nickel precious metal resource, one of the largest ones in the world. And we're the first company to receive all of our permits to actually build and operate a mine there. Unfortunately, it seems like the final phase of permitting anymore is litigation. We've been in litigation for the last 3 years, and I think we had 22 different legal challenges filed. Everything that's got to a final decision, we've prevailed on. We're down to our last 4 or 5, and those are proceeding very well from my perspective. I'm an environmental engineer by training. I've spent the majority of my career exclusively in the U.S. designing, permitting, and building mines in the U.S. Got the Eagle nickel mine designed, permitted, and we sold it to Lundin, but it's been a great mine. But that's the only nickel mine in the U.S., and that'll be shutting down here in a few years. Our project, the NorthMet project, owned and operated by Polymet, that will become the only nickel producer in the U.S. And just a couple of statistics to throw out there to get everyone thinking about for the conversation here. Our project, as permitted, will produce enough copper to make 6.7 million electric vehicles, enough nickel to produce 2.6 million electric vehicles, and enough cobalt to produce 690,000 electric vehicles. Every one of those wind turbines that you see spinning requires about 10,000 pounds of copper, about 5 tons of copper in each one of those wind turbines. We're pretty excited about all this, but I'll just wrap up here with one final statistic, which I find quite amazing and shocking, and everyone should kind of be wringing their hands about this. But the World Bank put out a statistic a couple of years ago that said over the last 5,000 years of the history of mankind, about 550 million tons of copper have been produced worldwide. They're estimating we need to produce that much copper again in the next 25 years to meet the demands for all these things that we're talking about.
Wow, that's quite the statistic to leave us with. Thanks, John, for that. And so we're going to jump into the discussion now, but I just wanted to flag that I will also be keeping an eye on audience questions too. So as those pop into your head as we're talking, please submit those through the Q&A box, and then I'll toss those out to our panelists. So I want to start off with a question that some of you have already brought up, Tristan, I think most directly, which is the Biden administration stance here. So what should we make of the Biden administration's stance on critical minerals in the recent report the White House released? Do you feel that President Biden and his team will support more domestic mining? And Rich, I'm going to start with you here, and then we'll toss it out to the rest of the panel.
Thanks, Abby. Well, we remain incredibly optimistic that this administration gets it. We've had long conversations with Secretary Granholm. We've had outreach directly from the White House and conversations with them. Had conversations with labor organizations, and now you're starting to see part of the grant programs actually hitting the ground, coming out of DOE and DOD for some of the processing that we've been talking about. So those are real outcomes, real results. On the permitting front, we are a very patient industry. It takes 10 years in many cases to get mines up and running, and even expansions. That's a long window. That's a long time frame. Our competitors can do it in 2 or 3 years. So we're trying to equalize in the competitiveness nature and attract capital to the United States so that we can get these projects up and running. So, it's early on in the game here, but we remain optimistic that the administration understands the demand side, and those larger decisions, some have been made, but more are coming.
So Tristan, I want to bring you in here because you seemed maybe a little bit more pessimistic than Rich is optimistic here. So tell us why you're a little cynical. You said, it seems like nothing is happening. Talk to us a little bit more about that. What would you like to see happening in the Biden administration, and why do you get this sense that that there is nothing happening at the moment?
Sure. So when I was in the Trump administration, I shepherded the executive order of December 2017 that required U.S. Geological Survey and the Interior Department to publish that list of 35 critical minerals. And in that executive order, it directed federal agencies to aggressively pursue critical minerals development and all authorities they have to do everything they can on critical minerals. That was December 2017. 2.5 years passed, and we get to September 2020. And then an executive order is released by the Trump administration that calls for agencies to aggressively look at all their authorities on critical minerals, did everything they can on critical minerals. And among those actions that was taken was to direct the DOE to open up its loan program office to allow for loans to critical minerals projects that were related to either renewables or advanced nuclear. As far as I can tell, that office has that authority and hasn't really done a whole lot with it. Maybe they've received applications that have not been made public, but so far I've just seen a lot of blah, 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 blah about how much they support critical minerals, but nothing actually happening. So we enter the Biden administration. First up, a supply chain executive order that requires no fewer than 10 or 12, 13 different reports come out. Agencies must look aggressively at all their existing authorities and what they can do in critical minerals. And a report comes out saying DOE should use its loan program office for minerals projects. Great, they already can. All these different grants coming out of DOE, we see tens of millions of dollars in little R&D things going to university consortiums and little academics. These are all great little things, but we don't need more R&D to do critical minerals processing. We know how to do it. It's just that we don't really want to, because mine remains a 4-letter word for the environmental wing of the Democratic Party.
Thanks for that, Tristan. And Congressman, I want to bring you in on this as well. You through your seat on the Hill, you've questioned and talked to some of the Biden administration officials, and I want to ask you, what's the sense that you get from them as to how focused they are on this, and do you get sort of maybe a differing opinion depending on which officials you're talking to in the administration?
Well, I think that, you have to, words are words and actions are actions. If you look at candidate Biden in 2020, when he said we are going to domestically source those critical minerals for electric vehicles and charging stations, that was good news, right? And then in May of 2021, he says, now we're going to outsource those critical minerals now. Why? Well, you look at the Secretary of the Interior. We knew she was anti-jobs, anti-mining, and anti-pipeline. And the Biden administration knew that, still put her up, and she was. And our two U.S. senators in Minnesota voted to support her. When I questioned her last week, she couldn't give an answer on the 234,000 acres that she wanted removed from mining, which would hurt both PolyMet and Twin Metals. And you look at the Secretary of Vilsack, USDA, I asked him, would you allow the process to go forward without prejudging it? And he couldn't answer that. I mean, so you look at what this administration is doing, who they're appointing in key positions, and that'll tell you their philosophy on critical minerals and mining in our country. The keep it in the ground mentality, or otherwise. And I'll share with you, I had an amendment in transportation infrastructure that the Secretary of Commerce would make sure that no critical mineral that this government purchased was mined by forced child labor. And it got watered down by the Democrats. Every single Democrat voted against my bill. Why? We have, as John Cherry said, we have a perfect opportunity in northeastern Minnesota in the Duluth complex to do it right. Best labor, best environmental standards in the world. And we have not only this administration, but members in Congress, including in my awesome state of Minnesota, that are adamantly against it. And I want to share something with you all. I want to tell you that if you ever hear there's going to be, quote, mining in the boundary waters, end quote, that is absolutely false. There's not going to be mining in the boundary waters, canoe area wilderness, or the buffer zone around it. Congressman Oberstar at the time says, okay, if you're going to make this wilderness on the outside, do not take our livelihoods away. And I was timber producing and mining. Mining is a desired condition for our northeastern Minnesota. So I think you're looking at the Biden administration that is placating to some really far left extremists that don't want the mining. In fact, I asked a mining expert, okay, where in this country should we mine? We don't have the opportunity, but where could we mine this? They couldn't answer. And it's a battle that I have a burning desire to fight. I know that we are right on this issue, and we have to stand strong. We do it better than anybody in the world. And if COVID has taught us anything, it's not to be dependent on foreign nations for critical and rare earths, our pharmaceuticals, our PPEs, etc. So we as a nation have to learn this. And the district that I represent, and the men and the women that work in the mining arena and others, we are ready, able, willing to go forward. There's Don Cherry and Twin Metals, 10 years of permitting. Another company, PolyMet, in their 19th year, and that's why I introduced the Accessing America's Critical Minerals Act. Timeliness, transparency, and reasonableness in the permitting is what all we're asking, while still maintaining the highest standards in the world.
Got it. Thank you, Congressman, for that. And John, I want to pull you in here as well. What sort of signals are you getting from the Biden administration that they are they supportive of projects like the one that you're working on? Is that the sense that you're getting, or are you still maybe not quite hearing directly yet from the administration?
Well, I think the most encouraging thing for us is that we did receive all of our permits, although we're finishing up the litigation on that. In this critical minerals report on the supply chain that just came out a couple of weeks ago, PolyMet was one of the very few mines that was even mentioned in the report. So we were actually called out as a mine that's permitted, noted the litigation. But once the Eagle Mine is done operating here in a couple of years, we will be the only fully permitted operating nickel mine in the U.S. And you can't make renewable products, whether it's the cars, the wind turbines, or the battery storage, or whatever it may be. You can't mine that, can't make that without metals. So I think the discussion should actually be framed in a way that if we want the renewable energy and the decarbonized future that we're all looking for, you cannot do that without mining. So I think the discussion actually needs to be not about whether we should mine or not, or mine in this place or that place, because mining is one of the unique industries where you can't pick where you want to mine. you have to mine where the ore body's located. So the discussion really shouldn't be about whether we should mine or not. It should be about how we mine and how we can do that responsibly to make these metals that we need. Otherwise, this renewable energy economy, it's not going to happen.
Can I add to that?
Please, go
John,
ahead. Yeah.
John is exactly right. If we are going to, we don't pick and choose where these minerals are located. The good Lord placed them, and we are blessed in northeastern Minnesota to have them. And John's exactly right. It does not make sense if we transform into alternative sources of energy, et cetera, without holding those critical minerals, which are dependent on the transformation in the palm of our own hands, mining it here. And John talked about the green energy and mining in an ethically and responsible way. We can do that, and he's leading the charge with PolyMet. He's met or exceeded every single EPA and labor standard that we have, and we have the best in the world. And so the frustration for me is on the economy side. We know that PolyMet alone, these are 2011 numbers, so we can add several million to them. But in 2011, $500 and some million of economic activity in northeastern Minnesota. That's just one mine, PolyMet. That's like bringing the Super Bowl to northeastern Minnesota every year for decades and decades and decades. And this is what we're fighting for. It's a win for the jobs. It's a win for the economy. It's a win for our strategic national security, and it's a win for electric vehicles and charging stations and alternative sources of energy. It is a big win for this country, and I think that John and his staff are doing a tremendous job in an environment that's not so friendly. But I've said this: the truth, the facts, and the science are on our side.
Well, Congressman, let me follow up with you quickly here, because I know that you've worked extensively on this issue, especially permitting with legislation in Congress. And so we have a question from the audience here from Stuart Levenbach that says, is there any bipartisan interest in streamlining the permitting process for remining of abandoned mines, perhaps specifically for the purpose of critical minerals? And to what extent could remining abandoned mines address the nation's need for critical minerals? So I want to ask you a little bit about, are you seeing some bipartisan interest? You mentioned a little earlier that some of your Democratic colleagues might not be as thrilled about domestic mining, but are you finding some that are, and some that you can work with?
Yeah, we're finding in the abandoned mine lands we are, and there's bipartisan conversations, and but I will say there's very little bipartisanship in the critical minerals area in mining in our country. There's a powerful lobbying, an anti-mining group and they're very powerful, and they have a lot of funds, so they weaponize the court system. When PolyMet gets all the permits they have, they find another way to weaponize the court system, and that's unacceptable. That's why my Accessing American Critical Minerals Act is so important, that we don't tie every little permit up, and we stop the duplication of the state and the federal permitting processes in some of the areas without sacrificing our environmental standards. So I think there is some bipartisanship. That's how we're gonna do it, and it's up to me and others to educate and educate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle how important it is. We cannot use minerals that are forced to be mined by child slave labor. Our country's better than that. I know for a fact that we mine in northeastern Minnesota, it's going to be the best labor standards, the best environmental standards, and the safest way to do it. I know that because we've done it before, and I just think that the opportunity is right here, and we need to seize it, and all of us have a responsibility, and I think we're all doing a very good job of promoting the ability to mine in this country, and mine, as John says, where the ore body is.
Definitely, and let me toss the second part of Stuart's question over to you, Rich, which he asked about, remining abandoned mines and what opportunity there is to address the nation's need for critical minerals through that. Is that an approach that you see as something that the administration should be looking into, and that lawmakers should be looking into?
I think that the answer is yes. And so I have a staffer that you can't see. He's going like this because I got to get to the floor and vote. But the answer is the answer is yes. I think there's an opportunity. We're through technology. We're seeing some of the waste rock from the 70s and 80s now being remined, specifically in the iron ore area, and direct reduction. And I think that we when we use with the science is just exponentially growing each year because we're asking our producers to do that, and they're coming up with awesome ways to have a cleaner mine plan, keeping the environment safe. I mean, it's unbelievable the technology that has been in the mining arena. So for me, it's a long answer, but it's a yes. We can get things done. So I would say, before I head to the floor, if I may just say closing, I apologize for not being here the entire time. This is in our wheelhouse in Northeastern Minnesota. So I want to Rich, Tristan, and John, know that you have a strong advocate in mining in Northeastern Minnesota and mining across this nation. As the ranking member on environmental minerals and natural resources, this is where we live. This is where we can prosper and grow, and that's the goal of mine. So I want to thank each and every one of you for your commitment. You have my commitment to work together. And we'll see you all very soon. And happy and safe 4th of July.
Thank you, Congressman, for being with us this morning.
Yep.
And Rich, let me bring you in on this question on remining abandoned mines for critical minerals. Is this a possibility you see, an opportunity that you see for the industry here in the U.S.?
Short answer is yes, it's a possible solution, and the technology is, as the Congressman said, it is evolving. We have a number of our members now looking at new systems that they can put in place to look at tailings and waste rock that can produce some of these materials. To be determined what that volume looks like, but there are existing operations right now that are putting on this technology in certain states across the country. So that's very, very exciting. If I could jump back to the question about bipartisanship and examples of that. I think you saw just last week, Congressman Jim Costa of California lead a letter with 14 Democrats last week supporting increased domestic mining. I don't think we've seen that in a very long time. I think that bipartisan recognition that the stable availability of mine materials holds a huge future for us in the political spectrum. So we're excited to see that. There are other examples on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee where moderate Western Democrats are making a difference and coming together. Tristan, hold out hope. I think we're going to see something here, hopefully towards the end of the year and early next. But great questions. Thank you, Abby.
Great, and so I want to bring another question in here. It's a question that I had on my list, and also that Amina Syed from IHS Markit has posed really great here in the chat. So clearly, there's a tension with some environmental groups when it comes to more mining domestically, and that's a very important constituency of President Biden as well. So I want to pose this question and get some thoughts from all three of you on this, which is, how does the Biden administration navigate that tension, and won't any mining that they do support immediately be targeted by environmental groups? And Tristan, let's start with you on this one here.
Sure. So first, I would say that I think John Cherry's absolutely right that the way forward on minerals is to link minerals to renewables. I would also add advanced nuclear technology to that. Don't forget that uranium is one of the 35 critical minerals that USGS has identified. I think one drawback to that strategy is that there are a lot of other minerals too that are not necessarily used for renewables that are also critical, and also that have huge critical import dependence. That said, I think on the politics and on the immediate market need, I think John is absolutely right that linking renewables and minerals is a winning strategy. I also think that Rich is right that I think there is something happening on the Hill at least when it comes to bipartisanship. I think that any progress that has been made over the past decade on critical minerals has largely been due to efforts at Congress. In fact, I would say that Colin Hayes, who was former staff director at the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, I think many of us sort of regard him as the godfather of minerals policy, has been working on this, as I say, for a decade. And I think that many of his efforts bore fruit when he was on the Hill. Most notably in the passage of the recent omnibus it may have been a minibus, I forget, that included Senator Murkowski's Critical Minerals Policy Act, or at least large portions of it. So I think that there is a way forward. I think John's right on the linkage with renewables. I think Rich is right on something happening in Congress that is more bipartisan. And I think there's some hope on the Hill. I have much less hope for the executive branch. I think the Interior Department cares about one thing right now, and that is 30 by 30, removing 30% of land and water from federal access for any kind of resource extraction. That is Secretary Haaland's objective. That is her mission. She introduced that bill when she was on the Hill, or at least sponsored it. And that is her driving passion, as far as I can tell. I could be wrong. That's my read on it. And so I think you have this real dichotomy between Congress, where things are possible, big things are still possible in Congress, and an executive branch that might be interested in solving the battery problem only insofar as it helps EVs and renewables. But the sort of broader interest in minerals, I think, is perhaps calculated. Thanks.
Yeah. And John, let me bring you in here too, because you mentioned earlier that one of the, I think the way you put it was sort of the last phase in permitting has been litigation. And so clearly you've faced quite a few legal challenges on your project. Have you had any success though in talking with environmental groups and pitching your project in the way that you mentioned earlier, tying minerals to renewable energy and the success of both?
Sure, we talk to everyone we can, any opportunity we can. So we've reached out, and we're partners with Ducks Unlimited and some of the other conservation organizations. That being said, it seems like there's always an environmental group here or there that is opposed to mining or anti-development or whatever you want to call it. But again, I think we got to bring this back to if you want the renewable economy and you want the renewable energy, you can't do that without mining. And so there's got to be some common ground in there, and I'm optimistic about that. But you can reach common ground maybe with 99%. I think that's being optimistic. But it only takes one entity to file a lawsuit and to slow things down and bog it down. And I've done this a handful of times at different projects in the U.S. Unfortunately, it takes time. People ask me, how long does it take and how much money does it take to permit a mine in the U.S. today? And my estimate is it's at least 7 to 10 years to permit it, and well north of $100 million to do it. And that's just to get your permits in hand. Once you have those permits in hand, there's always a group out there that wants to try and take those away. They tie you up in court. And again, it only takes a couple to do that. So I think that this may sound even harder than fixing the streamlining the permitting, but there's got to be something along the lines of tort reform or something to do on the legal side, because that can hang you up almost as long as the permitting side of things. Yeah, but people, our system in the U.S., people do have the right to file legal challenges, but there's got to be a better way to streamline and to get this to a place. I think that the best way is if you can find common ground, but it only takes that one to slow things down and hold it up.
Got it, and I see what you mean there, and so one question we've been getting a couple times from the audience here is a question about recycling minerals, and I know that Tristan, you had a pretty awesome pun earlier about recycling, but we haven't gotten directly into this issue of recycling. And one of the things that we saw come up a couple weeks ago before the critical minerals report came out from the administration was this concern. I think that the administration would be focused more on recycling and looking to foreign suppliers, ally foreign suppliers, as opposed to domestic mining. And so let me pose this question, and I'll go first to Rich here. What is the role of recycling minerals? And what sort of balance should be struck between recycling and also pursuing more mining domestically?
Well, again, if you look at the forecasts on the demand side, you look at John's quote from the World Bank, you look at McKinsey or IHS, the forecast for what is needed is overwhelming. And that requires, and I think the administration is correct, to pursue a comprehensive strategy that looks at how they can commit to getting domestic mineral supplies from all sources. That includes recycling, that includes mine expansion, that includes new mines, that includes new technology, that includes processing, that includes new ways of mining. Again, mining, as the congressman said, to the highest environmental and labor standards in the world. We do it the best here. We believe that's the right approach, and we're willing to partner with anyone who will take a look at that. Recycling does have a role. I can't give you a percentage on that. I think that industry is still evolving. There are certainly things being done to recover critical minerals from technologies. For example, obviously the cell phone recycling programs are interesting, but the volumes that are required here need projects, must have projects like PolyMet, where minerals are commingled with nickel and cobalt and graphite. And you see that with the rest of our members who are, generally straight, for example, copper producers. There are other things in there that they are producing that are essential. They're commingled. And we talked about tailings or reprocessing of abandoned mines. There are things in there. We're going to need all of this if we're going to meet the challenges we face for renewables, for climate change, for transportation, for EVs. So, we're partnering across the board to make sure that can happen.
Definitely. And Tristan, I want to bring you in here on recycling, but I also want to pose a second question to you as well, which is another one from Amina here asking, you talked a little bit about the DOE loan program earlier. Beyond the loan program, which, you're making an argument that maybe not a lot's being done there right now. Beyond the loan program, what are other things that the Energy Department and or the Interior Department and or other agencies can be doing to support critical minerals?
Sure, great questions. I think recycling is huge. I think we should be doing as much of it as we can. I think Rich is also right that even if we do as much as we can, we're still not going to get it as much as we need. The problem with recycling is that it's a very chemical process. When batteries, for example, are used and depleted, you have to handle them very carefully. And it's a very expensive, labor-intensive, time-intensive, energy-intensive, chemical-intensive process. I live in Fairfax County, right on the border with Alexandria, and I can't recycle glass bottles. I can recycle soda cans, but I can't recycle bottles. If I can't recycle glass bottles, how am I going to recycle a cell phone battery or a car battery? And so I think there are enormous challenges there where people have this idea that is either mystical or fantastical about how clean the process can be. And maybe it can be super clean, but you're going to have to spend money to do that. I think when it comes to things agencies can do, the Defense Department has probably the biggest, most powerful authorities, and they guard them very carefully. But if the Defense Production Act is invoked, it's a very, very powerful statute. And DOD, of course, is a very well-financed consumer. I think the problem for an agency like DOE is that it has so many different competing mandates. that it typically runs around doing 100 different things, and none of those 100 different things get done particularly well. This is not a slight on the people who work there. This is a slight on the competing directives that they've been given by the administration and by Congresses over the past several decades. And so when it comes to interior, there's a lot U.S. Geological Survey can be doing, should be doing, and is able to do. There should be a massively intensive survey of U.S. land and water to find all the minerals that we have. We have a lot, but we haven't done the sort of high fidelity survey in a lot of area, the geospatial mapping and all that kind of thing. That could be done. But good luck getting, John Cherry's 1 out of 3 if it takes one person to block a project, it takes half a person to block a mapping survey in a sensitive water habitat or something. Just getting the data is going to be extremely difficult, and so it really takes an enormous force to move an object to accelerate an object as massive as the federal government, and the White House can do it, but they are not.
Got it. And John, let me bring you in too on this question of what more the administration, what more federal agencies might be able to do. What are a couple of things that you'd like to see, especially when you're thinking about your specific project? Are there things that you have all your permits, you're still facing some lawsuits? Are there things that the administration can do to help speed up the process for you, or to directly support your project in a way that would help, get some shovels in the ground and get things moving?
It's a great question. I think one of the things that could probably help is some clear direction from the administration. They've started to do this in some of these reports about the importance of the critical minerals and metals that we need, but they go through the alphabet soup of the various agencies that are out there. And one of the things that we've experienced, I know a lot of others have experienced, I know Rich can speak to this. It's one thing for the White House to put forth a mandate or wherever they want to go, but then you have these various administrative agencies, and some are better than others, but in many instances, you'll find one executive branch agency in direct conflict with the other executive branch agency. And sometimes as a permittee, you're actually stuck right in between those two agencies that have differing views on how things could or should be done, or one wants to re-review something that somebody else has done. And then again, it just adds more time and more process and more money to develop the minerals that are out there.
And let me follow up with you here on a question that's been asked in the chat from Anthony Gikas. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He says, what can be done by mining companies and industry groups to stop all this litigation? He says, he asks, when is enough enough?
Great question. Again, we have to balance that. Remember, what the judicial system in the U.S. is a very unique system, right? And trying to explain to other people outside of the country how our legal system and process works, people kind of shake their heads, right? So people have the right to challenge, as they should, but there needs to be more of an efficient process, a finite process, and just a better, more efficient way to get through that. Again, that would require changing laws and process to do that. But challenge after challenge, maybe a way to help this out, maybe where someone can go down and file a lawsuit with $25 on a piece of paper, right? Or push a button online and file a lawsuit. Now, if there were bonding requirements, for example, for a losing party to pay the losses that someone might incur for a 2 or 3 year delay in bringing those metals to the market, that might cause people to think twice about that, or it might remove some of the frivolous challenges that are out there.
And Rich, let me bring you in on this question also. Tell us a little bit about what you see as the challenges with with litigation that many of these projects, most of these projects face not just one but multiple lawsuits.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously well aware of the challenges related to, the litigation system in the United States. I guess I would say one thing in context, this is not certainly a new phenomenon and impacts just about everyone who's trying to operate on public lands, or anyone who's trying to be part of the build out in this careful energy transition to obtain permits for building anything. And those, are often subject to litigation, unfortunately. But it's companies like PolyMet that do it right and upfront, sit down with the local community, sit down with the parties of interest, and try to identify recommendations or issues of concern upfront in the process, so that they can be addressed and that people are heard, and things can be brought forward to the table in a public way, so that the companies and the operators can make sure that those issues are being carefully considered and addressed. So, I firmly believe that our companies do it the best in the world, that what we need here is a little trust. Going back to the nitty gritty, certainly the NEPA reform package under the past administration was really the first time in 40 years that law had been overhauled. Obviously, the Biden team is going to take a different approach. That shouldn't surprise anybody. What might surprise them is to get the build out that they need for Made in America, to get those power lines, some of those NEPA reforms for windmills, things like that. Other projects are going to be able, or potentially be able to be maintained, so that things can get built to get to where we all want to go.
Definitely. And we are nearing the end of the hour. It's surprising to me. We could probably keep talking about this for another hour, but we're gonna wrap up here with a couple lightning round questions, and they might be the toughest questions I'm gonna ask, because I'm gonna ask you to keep your answer to 5 words or less. So we've got 3 of them. So first, what do you see as the most important thing that the Biden administration can do to support domestic mining of critical minerals? Remember, 5 words or less. Tristan, I'm going to start with you.
Activate DOE loan program.
Perfect. Rich?
In order to be different, I'm using more than 5 words. Take more aggressive action in the Department of Defense Production Act loan program.
Got it. And John?
Align various federal agencies. Align various federal agencies with the White House.
Got it. Perfect. You all kept them short. Not exactly 5 words, all of them, but that's all right. I'll let it slide. Okay, second question here, which is, when do you think we'll see permitting reforms such as those that Congressman Stauber has proposed signed into law, not just passed committee, signed into law?
5 years plus, if ever.
Rich?
Through the Senate in the 4th quarter of this year or the 1st quarter of next.
Got it. John?
When the renewable energy production isn't meeting their expectation because the minerals aren't there.
All right. Last one here, which is, how long might it take for the U.S. to again become a major player in supplying critical minerals globally? We're going to start with John this time.
So say that again. How long will it take?
How long might it take for the U.S. to again become a major player supplying critical minerals globally?
That's a great question. It can happen as fast as the government wants it to happen, which will be a function of, do they have the minerals to do what they want to do?
Got it. All right, Rich.
I support John's answer. We're patient. It could take 5 to 10 years.
All right, Tristan.
We won World War II in 4 years, so
All right. Maybe 4 years are ambiguous. All right. Well, that wraps it up here. I'm going to pass it back to Jeff. Thank you all for indulging me on those lightning round questions and for a great discussion. I didn't even ask most of my questions because the audience had such great questions. So I just kept asking those. So thanks everyone for having me. Thanks for the discussion, and I'll pass it to Jeff for closing remarks.
Thanks, Abby, and appreciate you did a great job moderating. Thanks for all the audience participants, and thanks for our panelists who provided a really informative and interesting hour-long discussion. So on behalf of ConservAmerica, I just want to wish everyone a great July 4th holiday. Stay tuned. We will be doing some additional work in this area as well of critical minerals, whether it's educational or some various policy proposals coming forward. So look out for that. And then also in a few weeks on July 21st, we'll also be having another webinar on pros and cons of carbon pricing. So we invite all of you to join that as well. But once again, thanks everybody for joining, and have a great holiday weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.